midst of the corn, the middle of the USA. Here's where I was born, and here's where I'm going to stay.
I love farming. I was born a farmer. My grandpa farmed on the Inman farm all his life. I have been married to my wife Karen for 53 years.
We were raised so with the farm at heart. Our love for tractors, our love for the ground, the soil. I love the smell of the soil.
The very first toy show that we went to was up at Dyersville.
We kind of thought we died and gone to heaven because we'd never seen so many beautiful old farm toys.
I had no idea that there was anybody collecting toys.
I liked the toys because there were toys there like the old 60 John Deere, and that's what I learned to drive tractor on.
I went all my life, never had a hobby, and now that I'm into the toys, I love it. I get such a joy out of bringing it back to life.
When they leave his hands, they're a lot of times in better shape than what they came out of the factory when they were made.
My toy room, to me, is like a history of farming. I tell my wife every time that we're working in the fields and that I'm just so thankful that our relatives settled here years ago on this farm.
I've been retired 14 years, but I still restore old tractors, and I just love old tractors, toys and real ones. This F12 right here was the first tractor I ever drove. I was probably 8 years old. I got 2 toys a year, one for Christmas, one for my birthday, and I still have all but one. I enjoy it. It's a good hobby. It keeps me young. I'll be 75 this summer. My wife says, "What are you going to do with that piece of junk?" I said, "I'm going to restore it, and then I'll sell it." I don't sell nothing.
Don't want to live in the city.
I wanted to be a farmer. Doing farm work to me was not work, it was fun. I always wanted to imitate my dad. As a 5-year-old kid, I started driving tractors. I have 3 John Deeres, all 3 tractors at one time or the other I farmed with, or my dad farmed with. You remember driving them as a kid, something that you bought to relive the old days. Well, some of the toys in my collection are not restored. They're really made to leave as they are. I was at a farm auction and I run into Roger Inman and he asked me, "Do you still have your farm toys when you were a kid?" "Why?" He said, "Well, I collect farm toys." I didn't think farmers did that because, farmers' reputation was they were frugal, they weren't supposed to have any hobbies, when they worked from sunrise to sunset. I've been to think that we're all maybe so-called coming out of the closet because nobody wanted to admit that the young farmer collected toys. That was for kids. This was not something for the adults. I could care less what my toys are, what they're worth. I buy them and I have them because I like them.
I always took my toys apart, put them back together. Basically, I had a tomboy at heart. When I graduated, I was 21. I went to work for Case, and I got to know some of the farmers, but I didn't really have any friends or know anybody out here. And I drove 350 miles to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to attend my first toy show. I started going to toy shows back in the early 80s and, going as collecting toys. I really liked the people. They were honest. They were fun. So I started trading and then started selling, and pretty soon I realized I was selling more than I was collecting, and that maybe I better get a name for my business. A lot of people start collecting by going back and collecting what they grew up with on the farm. I still enjoy the collecting and the meeting of the people at the toy shows and the people at on the phone and on the counter here. Farm toy collecting can be addicting in a good way because you get out and meet a lot of people. You get some fun stuff that you got a lot of good memories with. I love the small town life.
Out in the country, gravel road.
About 1938, my dad had a chance to rent an old farm in Pennsylvania. So we moved from Ohio to Pennsylvania. We had enough that we could keep the family going. And years later, I remember Mom saying that even though times were tough, we didn't have much. We was never on relief. When we were growing up, didn't get toys during the Second World War. By the time toys were available, we were 12 or 14, and we didn't really play with toys. We had plenty of work to do around the farm. Over a period of 20 years, I've restored over 500 pedal tractors. I enjoy going out rooting around through farm dumps. I found several there, and to find one is like finding a gem. I told my wife at one time that I couldn't spend my bread money for toys, but on the other hand, I didn't want to spend my toy money for bread.
Out in the country, gravel road, a ramble on.
Been dairy farming here at my grandparents' farm, which has been in the family since 1878. But I came over here in the summertime, starting at age 9, to help my grandparents out. My grandfather, his name was Ralph Boots. He was an idol to me. I mimicked about everything he did. He let me drive the 8N Ford tractor. I thank God every day for the memories I had with Grandma and Grandpa. That was the best thing. Our dairy barn was built in 1900 by my great-great-grandfather, and I love it because of the history, to see how they farmed. And that's all that everyone did back then. Everyone was farming. If they didn't have a big farm, they had a small mini farm, they had a big garden. The cows are my friends. They provide a lot of joy in my life. Mom's there every morning to help with the milking and at night, and if it wasn't for her, I couldn't keep the farm going.
Well, I can't do a lot of the hard work on the farm anymore. I'm interested in the newspaper. It's priceless to have the farm in the family.
Every Christmas, Mom and Dad usually gave us a toy tractor or an implement to go with that tractor. I don't collect the toys so much as the original larger equipment that our neighbors had or grandparents' stuff, because that's more sentimental to me. I often wonder, why do I keep doing all this hard work and you don't get much pay for it? There's a person that's famous for literature that said, you haven't lived until you plowed the soil or smelled the soil. And I agree 100%. You have not lived until you've done that.
I'm a cool farm pound on a day about 110.
I've been collecting Olivers for about 15 years. There's a love of wanting to make things original. That's one of the reasons that I got into storing these tractors, is because I wanted them to look like they just come out of the showroom. You have to be almost a perfectionist whenever you're doing these tractors. Good is nice, but to be perfect, it takes a lot more time and patience. They were so much further ahead of the other tractors. The neatness of them, sleekness of them, the color is a dark green, the numbers are a red and yellow, the grills are a bright yellow, the striping on the sides is a bright orange, the wheels are a bright orange. A fella told me one time, he said, every good man will have one good dog and one good wife, and I think I've got them both, as she puts up with me working so many hours on my tractors. And another thing too, when you do these tractors, you don't want to part with them.
Working in this position, I have developed a lot of respect for farmers and agriculture in general. The core mission of the museum is to preserve the history of agriculture through farm toy collecting and through telling the story of the manufacturers who manufactured those toys. I love the detail in the toys. Plus, I also love the history and development, the nostalgia of the farm toys. This African tractor was being made by some kids selling them alongside the road. It was created out of rubber tires and spare metal parts and pieces. These kids love tractors just as much as collectors here love to collect toys. Dioramas, a lot of the times those will be related in some way to the person making the actual display, kind of something to create in memory of it. Several of our dioramas that we have in the museum have taken over months to create. It's not just grown-ups creating these dioramas either. There are very talented teenagers, young adults creating these detailed farm scenes. The farm toy collectors and people who restore toys, they're very open and friendly.
I'm a red-winged blackbird, sit singing on the fence. I'm a red-winged blackbird.
I grew up at grandfather's dairy farm. I spent a lot of hours riding on the tractor with my grandpa plowing. He was my best. He's probably still my best friend. He died in '87. I bought his tractor. I didn't want to let that thing get out of the family, and I totally restored it. And that was the beginning of my, tractor collection. I think we now have 8 Case tractors. If you don't pass it on, there's nothing to lead. So you have to keep the future going. You have to pass it on to the young ones. As I knew as a child, that's probably what got me into the tractors. I grew up on my grandfather's dairy farm. I spent a lot of hours riding on the tractor with my grandpa plowing. I still do work on the farm with my uncle. I help do the dairy work. I build dioramas because it's just fun to do. I wished in my life I had a 1,000-cow dairy, so I don't. So in your toys, I think you can express your own diorama and make your own farm scene. You can have whatever you want. I've always said it's really not the destination, it's the journey. And, all the time we spend out there looking for toys and all the enjoyment, we're all proud of our different buys. You get into it for the love of the toys. You don't get into it for the money. It becomes whether you make money, lose money, that's not the issue. It's the enjoyment you have and the love of toys.
I find that people who grew up on small farms still have an affinity for the pedal tractors and toys. I like to use the phrase that most of the people I met at the toy shows had their feet in the dirt